Sure. Whether you're a fractional, leader jumping in or you're a consultant, you have to tie in your activities with the overarching goals of that organization.
Welcome to the Fractional Edge, the turbocharged podcast that's your one-way ticket to unlocking the full potential of your workforce planning. I'm your host, Carol Fraser, a workforce planning whiz, fractional chief human resources officer, and a CEO who's been around the block and probably tripped over a few HR manuals along the way. With over 4 successful ventures under my belt, I've mastered the art of navigating the challenges faced by small and medium-sized businesses like yours. Get ready to dive deep into the exhilarating world of fractional executive staffing strategies, where every twist and turn is designed to turbocharge your business success and leave you ready to supercharge your company. From hilarious success stories to side-splitting strategies, we've got the inside scoop to optimize your business and keep you grinning from ear to ear. Let's rev up those engines and dive headfirst into the fast lane of business brilliance. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are listening to our podcast. This is the Fractional Edge. My name is Carol Fraser. I am a fractional CHRO, and we have this podcast to help small and medium-sized businesses understand how fractional executives can be a complete competitive advantage for their success. Today, I have Neel Singh. Neel, tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you would like our guests to know about you.
Hi, Carol. Thanks so much for having me on this podcast. Yes, so my name is Neel Singh. I'm based out of Vancouver, BC, up in Canada. I am a fractional executive, primarily as a fractional CMO. I also have a firm called Tropically. It is a strategic consultancy, so it's more project-based. As I get older and as I get more experience, it's getting harder and harder for me to define what I do. Hopefully we can get some of that out in this conversation today.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. I know that we have a couple of hours in between us, so I appreciate you getting onto the podcast kind of early here. So we had actually, before we started the podcast, talked a little bit about your movement from freelance to fractional. Can you kind of give us your journey on how you've come to be this fractional executive and a little bit about Tropically?
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of straggling paths that have converged into where I am today. I was a full-time executive for almost a decade for what was a small, scrappy startup, and we scaled it to a public company. So that gave me a lot of experience in being able to work with organizations that are going through growth phases and a lot of the growing pains that come with that. I went through it myself, and I feel like it's valuable information I can provide others with. But having done that, I had jumped out as an independent consultant a couple of years ago after we went public, and started taking on projects, and had a couple of partners with me. We formed Tropically together because we were already working together on these projects. But what I found was I really connected with some of the CEOs and the founders, and it was more than just project work they wanted. They respected my counsel, they respected my guidance, they respected my ability to help them navigate. And so, there's an old client of mine, even before I was an executive, I did a bunch of branding work for. More recently, he had asked if I could come in and fix his marketing. And that's always the ask. And so it's a big ask. He asked if I can help him find a CMO, really provide some leadership in the company. And I said to him, you have one person in your marketing department. You don't need a CMO. Again, lead to failure. So let me come in as a fractional, let me take a look under the hood. Let me see how you guys operate. And let me define and design the best marketing program for you that suits your sales initiatives, your growth initiatives, your product and service initiatives, and let's build a marketing function within your organization. And I've been working with them for over a year. We have launched several initiatives. We've given marketing an identity within the organization. And, there's a lot still to do. In addition to that, I had jumped in with an electric vehicle charging company shortly after I branched out on my own. And I jumped in as a COO. I knew the CEO, and he just needed a partner that was internal facing. And, I helped structure the goal setting of the company. We optimized the sales motion. We got marketing. We stood up marketing. And so it was a broader scope, but a smaller company. Yeah. So today, that's why I have the two streams in which I am doing fractional work. I really enjoy it. And then with my partners, we have the project-based, the brand strategy, marketing, scaling work that is more project-based.
You and your group can really kind of attack any of those issues as a collective, even if it's something that's short term, but then there you are as the fractional to ensure that whatever was put into place is actually being adopted and adding the value that you guys had hoped it would add. Is that right?
Yes, that is a scenario. It's not all the scenarios, but that is a scenario. Correct.
I recall you talking about that startup. Where did it start and where did it end when you were working there?
So I joined them when there were about 15 people, maybe 15 to 18 people. There was a vibrant CEO who I'm still in contact with. There was a 3-person R&D team. There's a few people on the video. It was a digital video company. That was the industry. It was in media tech. So it was a small 15-person startup in a small little office. That was 2012 when I joined. The company had been around for, as a startup before that for several years, I think about 5 years. And then we scaled it, as we got a Series A funding in 2013, and we scaled very rapidly to about 200 people, 250 people over the course of like a year or two, maybe about 2 years. And then we scaled even further to about 400 people. So it was startup for about a year, scrappy startup, and then the hyper growth phase probably lasted about 2 or 3 years. And then there's a bit of a stabilization. I would call it my change management years because my department got huge. So a lot of restructuring, getting the right functions under the right leaders. And then we went public in 2020. And so that was a different lens on how to look at the business. You look at it from a lens of an investor, the street, analysts, media. And so the marketing function isn't just about consumers anymore. It's also about, a different type of consumer, which is an investor. And so that really that broadened my lens a lot about how a business could morph and transform. So early stage startup, hyper growth, public company. And that was about a course of 9 years I was there.
I mean, talk about being able to understand each stage of an organization. And I mean, just the change component, that change management component. And like you said, even shifting the marketing focus from one that's consumer to one that's investor. When you think about the experiences that you have collected, and now you are supporting organizations as a fractional leader, what benefit do you bring to these organizations having had such a vast lens?
I made all the mistakes already. So, you think as a leader, if you don't have much experience scaling a team, it's not glamorous. It's not glamorous at all. And it's fun. It's energetic, but it's hard. And if your organization doesn't have a solid HR function, it doesn't have a rewards and recognition function, an upward mobility function, doing annual reviews or quarterly reviews or whatever you call it, it's very painful because now you have individuals reporting to you and individuals reporting to those individuals that are like, where's my raise and bonus? I've been here over a year. I've put so much blood, sweat, and tears into this. And like, how am I getting compensated? I've gone to the market. I've seen this person's making X amount more than I am, but I'm working 60 hours a week. So those questions, and you want to do your best, but you may not be equipped to do your best. If your company itself hasn't matured enough. So understanding how to get ahead of that, understanding how important it is to provide context as your company's going through change. Because we tend to, I'm sure there's many out there that can attest to this that are going through hyper growth. They may be a VP marketing, they might be a CRO, but their hands are dirty. They're in there. They're in the weeds. And when you're in the weeds as a leader, you could get siloed from your own team because you're constantly executing. So you have to keep that broader lens always. Communicate with your team, let them know what's going on, give them context on why you changed the project or changed the timeline. Always provide as much context as you can, because then it empowers the team. They get to understand the why things are happening, why things are changing. So the experience I bring is I did it poorly and I did it well, both within an organization. I learned from my mistakes. At one point, I had a team that did not like me to a team that liked me again. It's really humbling and it's really about them. So you're trying to build your own career. You're trying to be a leader, but the best way to be a leader is to ensure you're supporting and listening to your team. And it's easier said than done. Sometimes you don't realize you're not doing it. And when you realize that, you can correct that. So yeah, I think just to answer your question, I think the one thing that doesn't show up on my resume is change management, but I think all leaders should be trained in that, especially if they are going through, a growth phase.
Yeah. And you know what? We recognize that a lot of times leaders learn change management through baptism by fire. And you, like you said, make the mistakes, learn from the mistakes is the hard part right there. Honestly, that's the transition part. That's the hardest. You said a couple of things that I want to touch on. So the first one is, I heard a saying recently and I asked the person who told me, can I steal it? She said, yes. But the brain that created the problem is not the brain that can solve the problem. And this is where fractional executives can come in and really help to elevate that person in the role. You had talked about how that VP has their hands dirty. They're that hamster on the wheel, right? They're the ones who are a manager doer, right? A leader doer, because when you're in these fast-paced growth organizations, you're leveraging anybody that you have. But now there's this fractional executive that you can bring in that allows you to either ask that VP to please get all of the stuff that's getting your hands dirty done so that we can elevate you, or we're able to better understand how we can do something differently, a different process, a different way to manage our time, a different way to prioritize. And the only way that that happens is when you get somebody who's got the 50,000 foot view. So, I think how you've kind of explained how you benefit organizations, I would encourage our listeners to think about that, because it doesn't take a lot. I mean, look, you could be that fractional executive that comes in at the beginning of the month and the end of the month, and just make sure you're set to go for the month, and then you check up on how things are going. You're brought in at the beginning of the year for a greater period of time to define, design, budget, prioritize what the strategy and the marketing is going to look like for the year. It's one of those ways to always ensure that these companies have that competitive advantage, because otherwise they're really trying to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results.
Yes. Isn't that the definition of insanity?
Isn't it though? And you said something else where you said you had a time when you had a staff that didn't like you, and then you had a staff that did like you. And I think sometimes, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I think sometimes that's where people maybe are a little, a little blind. They don't see the blind spots and I think about the CEOs, the owners, the founders, the people who are these unicorn people. And you'd mentioned you had to do that for one of these companies where you are literally wearing 4 or 5 different hats, right? It's impossible to not only cut yourself into so many different parts, but then to be effective to the staff that you're trying to manage on so many different parts. And then you wonder, I wonder why my staff doesn't like me. So, I mean, yeah. I think those are just, I don't know if our listeners thought that through. I did, so happy to help. But as I think about it, this is again one of the true benefits of bringing somebody in. And we always say, you don't need us 100 hours a month. You need us enough so that you can be most effective at what you do. So I want to talk a little bit about as you're helping your clients now and you're bringing, whether it be strategy, whether it be marketing, whether it be operations, when you think about all of that, how do you link it to that overall workforce planning? You mentioned a little bit, but can you dig in deeper on that?
Sure. Whether you're a fractional, leader jumping in or you're a consultant, you have to tie in your activities with the overarching goals of that organization. You just do. And what are their KPIs? What are their growth goals? Whether, they use an OKR system, SMART goals, whatever it is, adopt that and integrate your activities with that. Now, workforce planning is the engine that scales an organization. It's the people, it's the people and the processes that surround the people. I think it's a part of almost every conversation. One of the first things I like to do, especially if I'm wearing my marketing hat, it kind of throws the leaders off a little bit, but I want to see the org chart. It's the first thing I want to do. Like, how are you organized? It's surprising how many org charts don't exist to scramble and kind of put it together. Or there's a version that was created like 6 years ago or something like that. So it's the never ending project, the org chart. But I like to see how the company is organized, who the leaders are responsible for, how big are their teams, who are their adjacent departments. The org chart starts as a map, but you ask all the questions around that. Now, if I'm coming in fractionally and my responsibility is to make marketing work within the organization, that requires headcount, that requires people, that requires tools. And so that is part of something that, when you're putting a budget in place and the budget's supposed to last a year, headcount's the biggest, cost to it, but I'd say biggest investment. So that is the biggest point of contention, biggest point of discussion for a number of reasons. One, it truly transforms the department. The right people will transform the business, and lead to improving or building the culture or adopting if it's already a great culture. So you can't do a strategy without thinking about the people that are going to be driving the strategy. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it is always front of mind. It is always part of the budgeting. It's always part of the culture. You're looking at the current team. How do you improve the team? You do it with the great people that you bring in or the people that you can coach within the teams. But yeah, it's definitely, if you're out there and, if you're a little bit more junior right now and you're planning to step into more of a leadership role, highly encourage learning more about workforce planning, how it works, how the impacts it has on a company, impacts it has on a strategy and a business and a budget, I should say.
Yeah, all of the above. That's great advice. And I'm really happy that you shared your experiences of how you've seen it successfully implemented and maybe not so successfully sometimes. So for our listeners, we've obviously had other CMOs or other strategy people here on the podcast. Give us an idea of where is your unique magic? When people think, God, I really want Neel, it's because of what?
When it comes to marketing, I understand the role it plays in the greater corporate and business strategy. I won't just come in and build a marketing function. I will tie it into the organization. I would say operations and marketing, probably HR are the most amorphous functions. They look different in different organizations. And so my experience being an entrepreneur, my experience running businesses, my experience through the hyper growth public company stage and helping build that gives me a very broad and very deep lens. And so if I am coming in and providing expertise around marketing, I am going to really understand and look under the hood of the business when it comes to their corporate growth, their fundraising strategy. Is there an M&A strategy? Are they expanding into new markets? Are they launching a new business model? Where is their business model broken? How's their customer experience journey? How are they retaining customers? I want to look at all of that, because then I can actually shape marketing to fit and to scale what they're doing. Now, maybe they've already have a pretty robust marketing function, and maybe it's just not working. So it's almost like taking apart the function. And I've built a team across digital inbound marketing, content and social, events, brand strategy, brand positioning. This is something that I used to do on my own as a freelancer for the longest time. So I'm very deep expertise in brand and how it affects all aspects of the business. People think a branding function is about, we need a new logo, a new name, all of that. And those things are important. But if you are launching a new product in a new market, you need to understand how your brand helps facilitate that, how your brand needs to adapt and grow into that. And maybe it's a different culture. If you're going into a new market, you really need to adapt that into your branding. If you are fundraising or if you are acquiring a business, there's an integration of brands. There's an integration of positioning, a value proposition, communication. Your customers might be overlapping now. So there's a very intricate brand strategy that lives among all of these activities. Again, it could be a vernacular thing. Some people might call it something else. But to me, I can see how brand persists across, all functions, all strategic outcomes, milestones, and things like that.
That is it. I love that perspective. It's even when I look at it from the HR side of it, right? We want to, when we're looking to support our clients around performance management, right? Or around performance reviews or ensuring that we've got the right goals, it's directly linked to the brand. I mean, now that the way you've kind of said it, it's like, of course, I want this person to be evaluated on how much of a brand ambassador have they been? Do they really understand how their role links to what we're doing here? And that could be a component, could be branding. So that's really interesting how you've kind of put that out there. I don't think a lot of people kind of make that connection. So your magic to really be able to say what it is that you do as a company, maybe how you do it as a company, and then is it permeating connectively, is the connective tissue positively permeating through the organization so that no matter who you talk to in the organization, you're talking to somebody from the company, so to speak, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I failed to mention employer brand is huge. How do you attract the best talent? They're gonna come check out your about page, your careers page. They're gonna check out which leaders are in your company. You're gonna check out the culture. That is branding at its finest, right? And it is a lens that's facing employees and potential talent as opposed to customers or investors, and is equally as important. And we see the big tech companies, they're very outward facing with their, culture. Some of it now you can say is a little cheesy, right? We've kind of come into a different era, but it was a driver for their growth. It was a driver for having the best talented people on their roster. So yeah, employer brand is like, it's linked with your corporate brand, of course, but it has its own function as well.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment I'm listening because I don't have time to sit down and read. So anytime I'm in the car, but I'm listening to Love as a Business Strategy. And I just heard a podcast recently talking about the ROI of your people is, return on intangibles. And they linked it quite easily to market share and how if you're lower than your competitors, they've found, and I can't even tell you which studies they were, but there were a gazillion studies, right? They've clearly linked that market share has a lot to do with how your organization's internal branding, external branding, and kind of the way it's all working together directly correlates with where you kind of are in the pecking order of competition. And if you think about your branding, your marketing, your people, all of that as part of the intangibles, because I think you and I don't know if you agree, but we've talked about this before on the podcast. Marketing is a partner to sales, right? You hope that your marketing pulls people in, but ultimately your sales are the people that close it. So the marketing is that return on intangibles. And if you think about, your $10 million company, but you're sixth in the pecking order of your competitions, and they've got 20% more market share than you do, would you like a couple more $1 million to your overall top line? Because if you do, it's the market share. It's all those things that aren't those outward efforts so much. It's all of that energy and everything that's happening inside your company that's helping to push out. This is an amazing place to work. We have an amazing product. We do things amazingly here. And that's where people go, God, there's something about that company that I just love. And I just want to go buy, I want to go buy my widget, my pen from them and not from them,
Yes, absolutely. We're emotional beings, as much as, us being leaders in business, we quantify so many things, but at the end of the day, you're going to still buy that car or those shoes. Maybe you shouldn't have spent so much on that trip, but we still make those decisions, and we forget that we are those type of people too. And so I think it's important to communicate those intangibles, to really demonstrate them. You do need to answer, what's in it for me, from a, practical standpoint, but you want your end client, you want the audience, you want people to be excited as you are. So that should permeate externally. It goes a long way.
It really does. And look, marketing's pivotal to that. So if you had to kind of do a little myth busting here, what would you tell our audience of small, medium-sized businesses, CEOs, founders, owners, maybe even PE firms or VCs? What kind of myth busting would you like them to know about hiring a fractional leader like you?
It's a fairly new function. So it's hard for me to really understand what the common perceptions are around it. But if I had to guess, the person you're hiring, you should be hiring them as if you're hiring a full-time person. So they are embedded in your business. So they shouldn't be arm's length. They should be embedded with your culture and your operations. They should be connecting with your teams. They should have access that a full-time person should have. So I don't know if there's a myth out there thinking that a fractional is just a part-time consultant or an advisor, but they're heavily operational. They're in the depths of your business. So I would say that's important to know for people looking out there. The value that a fractional can provide, especially for high growth startup companies, is that you don't have to pay $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year to get somebody that's super seasoned. You'll get somebody maybe a quarter of the time, for whatever, they end up charging. It's going to be a lot cheaper, but you are getting way more mileage out of that person. You can't say hour for hour. You can't compare a fractional to let's say a manager or whatever. I'm not putting anybody down, but just that hour for hour comparison, you get a lot more mileage out of it. You get that counsel, you get the experience, that they've been there before. You get a broader purview. If they've been working for 20, 30 years, they're probably going to do certain things a lot quicker too. So there's an effective outcome. There's some efficiencies around it too. They're like, oh, I've seen that before. Oh, that'll take me, 2 hours to fix, instead of trying to scramble for weeks. And, so there's these intangible benefits that come from a seasoned leader. A myth busting, approach to this is that they aren't just a consultant, and they aren't just external. They're embedded, and they provide a lot of mileage for the time that they invest in, the business, the company.
I think that is a fair misconception of fractional executives, that we are somehow just consultants. And I think that actually means that we actually can't bring our fullest magic, our fullest impact and value if we're left outside of the room, right? If we're not there listening to the good, the bad, the ugly. because the reason you wanted to bring in somebody with 30 years of experience is because we can help you quicker, right? We understand it. Like you said, we've been there, we've done that, we've seen how ugly it does get, and we can get you through it faster so that you don't have to stumble over yourselves. So I like those myths. Now, have you specifically learned any lessons in your fractional journey that you'd like to kind of fess up to and show some humanity?
It is tricky. It's once you're in, there's just so much to do. And, I think it's more, I feel it's really a gut check on how passionate you are about the company you're now part of, because I think there's some fractionals or even consultants that are very structured around hours. I use hours as a benchmark with my clients. I don't really, I'll say, here's the 10 to 12 hours. If I'm really excited, I'm probably going to be giving, 15 hours, 20 hours sometimes, and sometimes maybe a little bit less. So it works for me because I've been an entrepreneur. I like the flexibility, but figuring that out, because there's the other side of the coin. There's the client, there's the CEO and the founder. You really need to gel with them. They need to feel comfortable with you. They need to be able to trust you. So if they've always been 40 hours per week, 9 to 5, that's how I measure the worth of my, employees. That's how I measure the worth of my leadership team. And now I can't get a hold of you, a certain time on a Tuesday, that might not be the best fit. Or they might be the perfect fit if you were very calculated on your hours. So for me, it was a learning experience on how to get into a rhythm with, your client, with your CEO, the leadership team, the rhythm of the team that you're responsible for. I have to be careful with myself, because if I get excited, I do make myself very available, but then by doing that, and, if my workload increases within, that project or other things that have come in through the pipe, and then when you scale back, your client's going to be a little bit like not used to that, just kind of taking the candy back a little bit. So I think it's just getting into a rhythm, and each organization is different. And so once you're in there, really taking the first month or so to figure out that rhythm as you're doing your discovery, as you're learning and meeting the people, that rhythm and that cadence is going to be important.
Good advice. That's a great lesson learned on your part, and great advice for any other fractional as well as those who hire them. That's really awesome. If you had to give advice to the CEO or the founder that might be listening to us around your magic, can you give us kind of a nugget for them?
Please make the distinction between, do you want a peer or somebody coming in with that level of experience versus do you want somebody tactical and just fix my lead gen problem, or fix my retention problem? Because I am more of the former. I will help build the foundations that fix the latter. But if you just want the execution done immediately on things like that are very micro, I'm not minimizing anything. They're all important functions. But if it's a very distinct function that you need fixed, and you don't want to go through the journey of fixing it on a fundamental and strategic level, then I'm not the person. Then you can hire an agency, and they can do the lead gen for you, and they can try to fix it. If you want to fix the problem fundamentally, and you want something that can grow and scale, something for the long term, it will still work on short term things, but something that's going to make you proud, within a couple of years, that this is my marketing function, and look at the cool stuff that they're doing, and look at the impact they're having on my bottom line. That's the journey I go on. That's the journey I will go on with you.
Sweet. I like that. That's a great way to kind of say we can get all of that crap that's getting your hands dirty fixed if we refocus where we're looking. That's nice. Okay. So what was the one question you wished I would have asked you?
I mean, there's a whole bunch. I love talking to you, so we can go on for hours.
I got plenty of time.
But I think if you had asked me, what's the one thing we can fix or change in our economy or our society that would have the biggest impact on not just work, people's lives, people's career trajectories, the way people interact, So if you had asked me something, I mean, it's a broad scale question, I would say we need to fix the education system.
Sure. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like there's things that, now this can go into a lot of rabbit holes, but when you look at what's being taught versus what's happening in real life, the push for a 4-year degree, within 4 years, the world changes so much. That's just one example. So how can school systems adapt, and high school especially adapt, to allow people to teach kids how to think, not what to think? So can they be more critical thinkers? Can we be more collaborative? If I ask you a question that's on a test, that's called cheating. In real life, that's called collaborating. So can we teach students finance, public speaking? Can we teach them media literacy? Can we teach them to explore, take time to be creative, make mistakes? Because the current school system, mostly, not all of it, but mostly is backwards to that. It's built on the back of the Industrial Revolution, which is factory based. We are so different now. And so I feel that if these things were implemented on a fundamental level, if we were able to transform the education system, then I feel that, our workforce, our society would be more critical in terms of the way we think, more adaptive. Maybe our conversations would be a little bit more elevated. A lot of people are scared of AI taking their job, and a lot of people are excited for it. I would say the people that are scared of it perhaps were funneled into thinking they have to be hyper specialized. And now you have the copywriter that's writing blog posts specifically for the finance industry, in a certain market that could, at risk of losing their whole career. Perhaps they could have been better educated or broadly trained so that they can adapt out of these situations. So, I mean, again, I can go, this is a 1,000-armed octopus. We can go in a lot of directions here.
I'm passionate about this one. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just do feel that there's some dials that if they're changed on an education level, I think it has a profound impact on, our economy and how we work and how we interact with each other.
Now, just to remind our listeners, you're in Canada.
Yes, I am.
And I think that you would probably have a lot of people with that same sentiment here in the United States.
Well, I think a lot about I work a lot with U.S. clients. We're your 51st state up here. So, and a lot of the research I've done around the education system, it's around North America, but it's also the U.S. because of I think it's 1.7 trillion debt. The U.S. student loan debt. There's a very clear symptom of the issue, right? So, but yeah, I'm very familiar with the U.S. education system.
So, you brought up one thing that we didn't talk about a little bit, and I'd say, some might argue it's impacting your industry maybe a little more than most, is that whole AI thing. What are your thoughts on what's happening right now, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
The good is it's super cool. It's very generative AI is transformative. I use it a lot. We've had a lot of AI revolutions already, so this isn't the first. This is probably the most, probably has the largest hype cycle, but there's been a lot of breakthroughs. So this is the latest breakthrough. Now, this one's a little bit different because it's easily adapted by the masses. It's not some process neural net that's embedded in a business. You can go to ChatGPT, you can go to OpenAI and, sign up and all of a sudden use this powerful tool. So I think where we're at, I think the positives is that when I look at technologies like AI, it's a compressor. So a compressor of time. It can help me do some research, help me, I'm trying to draft up some copy, just to bounce it through the system. It may or may not, you like it. Help you refine it, but it's just like another thinking machine next to you. I think that's what makes it powerful, and the accessibility. So, I liken it back to, when the calculator was being, brought into schools and there's protests around it. And I think this is in the 70s and 80s, right? So you think about life without a calculator right now on your phone. It's embedded in our lives. So I think AI right now, it kind of has that similar effect where there's aversion to it, there's adoption to it, but it's here to stay. Like you can't stop it. So I think the good is it's a companion. It's going to transform how we work. It's going to transform the outcome of our work. The beauty is that we're all equipped with it. So, I think there's going to be a lot of creativity that comes out of it. We're already seeing a lot of it. I think the bad is I think you really do need to be trained on how to use it. Don't depend on it for everything. If you were to hire a intern to do your research, or if you were to hire a junior copywriter or a designer, you'd want to work with AI in the same way. Scrutinize its work. Don't take it for face value. So there's that aspect of it. Also, you have to think about the data that it's trained on. So that is very key and very important to any sort of AI application. So if a company is offering you an AI product, you need to really learn what data it's been trained on, because it's not just about the cool things it does, it's where it's pulling it from. So I think AI literacy is something that's going to be needed as this thing expands. The ugly, jobs are going to be lost, just like any sweeping transformational change or technological change. If you think about it on an individual level, that's going to be really hard for some people, and there's going to be, again, an advent of a whole bunch of new type of work and new type of jobs. We just don't know where it's going, right? So there's the whole thing around IP and likeness being ripped off. So I do believe rights management is going to have to, that function and that on platforms, and just the legal framework around it is going to have to expand. So when you are perhaps consuming some news or watching something that you think is Taylor Swift, there should be a stamp or some sort of indication there that this was created by AI, or AI had contributed to it. So I'm hoping that's where it goes. So there's a distinction. But if that doesn't get put in place, then it can get that's the ugly. We don't know what we'll be consuming. Is it real? Is it not? Is it on what data set? I think, I'm 45. I'm more skeptical of news and content that comes out online. I like to research the sources, but I think the younger generation may take it at face value. And if it's auto-generated by a biased AI machine, that could be very dangerous.
Definitely. Wow. Those are some really great insights. I don't think I've heard it kind of organized with such clarity. And you're not against it. You're not for it. It seems like you're a realist about it. And I think that pragmatic approach about, okay, guys, it's here. Let's see what's good, what's bad, and what's ugly, and how do we actually integrate it into our lives. Thank you so much. I'm glad we had that for our last question. So how can people find you?
Yeah, so neelsingh.com is probably my the best place. So NEELSINGH. I do spell Neel differently than other Neels. We also have Tropoly.io, so TROPOLY.io. That's my consulting firm. And LinkedIn. You can search me, Neel Singh. You have all my information there. I tend to respond quickly if you're not selling me something. And I'm not active on X, Twitter anymore. I've taken down my Facebook, and my Instagram is private. So I'm a little bit of a social media diet on my side.
That's fine. So, and also for our listeners, we will have a link to all of Neel's items that he just said, Tropoly, his LinkedIn, and even if you want to give me your email address, you can do it here. You can give it to me. We'll put it all in our comments or on the summary of today's podcast. So thank you, Neel, so much for taking time out of your day and helping us to educate our listeners on the magic that you can bring to their organizations. And remember, everyone, fractional is definitely the new wave of employment and the way of working. It really kind of marries with where we societally want to be working. So be sure you start to learn more about fractional executives and how they can help you give your company the competitive advantage. I'm Carol Fraser, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Fractional Edge podcast. We hope you had as much fun as we did in unraveling the mysteries of workforce planning and fractional executives. If you're feeling pumped to unleash your competitive edge, don't forget to hit that like button, share with your fellow trailblazers, and subscribe to ensure you never miss out on our electrifying episodes. If you want to dive deeper into the wisdom shared on today's podcast, head over to our website, thefractionaledge.com, where we can help you connect with guests, explore exciting collaboration opportunities, and subscribe to our newsletter. Until next time, keep your business soaring, take care, stay inspired, and we'll see you on our next podcast.